Hi guys, my name is Elizabeth and this is Miranda here, and we're going to go over the reproduction tracts. So we have a female pig tract here and a female cow tract here.
So let's get started. To be more specific on locations, we like to show gross anatomy so you guys can actually see physically what they look like, and we'll also have some diagrams that you guys will be able to use too. So starting with our pig tract here, we start with the most exterior portion of the female tract, which is called the vulva, which is right here. And then for our cow, it's a lot bigger because she is a bigger animal. And so what the vulva does is it's just kind of an opening for reproduction, so either natural insemination or artificial insemination, referred to as AI. And it has mucus, and that's pretty much the main function of that. And then we go into the vagina, which is like a barrier to the rest of the reproductive tract, protects from bacteria and other foreign things that might get in. So it's kind of hard to see the vagina, but it's like right after the vulva. Also on the pig, it's right after the vulva right here. Then we go into a really long tube called the cervix. So here is the pig's cervix, and then on the cow it's quite larger. It's right here. And we'll go into further detail about what the cervix and the vagina do in another video. And just to point out, since we're right next to the cervix, we have the bladder. And you're probably wondering what all this mess is. It's the broad ligament. So there's different names for the ligaments that hold up the reproductive tract. But it's really cool to see because you never know what you're going to get when you get a tract to do teaching with. So to go into further detail about names, you might hear the term uterus or uterine body, uterine horns. What does it all mean? So uterus is just a general term for the uterine horns and the uterine body. And so the uterine horns are right here. There's two of them. And where they meet is called the uterine body. And this whole thing is called the uterus. And so then when we go to the pig, she has a bigger uterus than the cow. And so here's one uterine horn, and here's another uterine horn. And where they meet is the uterine body. And Elizabeth is going to tell you a little bit why a pig's tract, it has bigger uterine horns than a cow's tract.
So when you compare the tract of the cow to the pig, we see that the uterine horns are much bigger. So when we think about a cow, they typically have one, maybe two babies. But a pig is going to have a litter, so they might have up to a dozen babies. So their uterine horns are going to have to be bigger in order to house all of the babies. So they might have fetuses on this side of the uterine body as well as, the uterine horns, and they might have fetuses on this side of the uterine horn as well.
Thank you, Elizabeth. So, going into a little bit further detail, when an embryo is made, the embryo is going to kind of move around for the first 21 days before it implants on the uterus, before it stays in a permanent place to grow through the rest of the female's gestation. And so depending on how many eggs ovulate from the ovary, which we'll go into more detail soon, depends on how many fetuses are going to grow in a litter-bearing species. So sometimes she could have 4 on this side and 6 on this side, just depending on how many eggs the ovaries ovulate. And with pigs, they have what is called a diffused placenta. So although this ovary might ovulate 2 and this ovary might ovulate 3, she could still have 3 on this side and 2 on this side, just depending on where those embryos move and where they implant. In pigs, each piglet has their own placenta, so their own little hotel room, as I like to call them. And depending on where the embryo implants depends on how much nutrition they might get. So if they're further away, like all the way out here, they may not get as much nutrients. It just kind of depends. And so that's kind of how runts are formed. So just to give you guys a little bit of a background about that. So as we go to the end of our uterine horn, we go to a part called the uterotubule junction. It's right here. I like to think of it as like, it looks like a J, so that's how I remember the location. And what the uterotubule junction does is actually really cool. It sorts out good and bad sperm, because bad sperm isn't going to inseminate an egg, and we want the egg to be inseminated. After it's sorted through the uterotubule junction, it will go into a tube called the isthmus. And the isthmus is the tube for sperm. It is the tube that sperm will travel to meet the egg. And I'm going to jump to our ovaries, which you saw earlier when I was mentioning ovulation. We will have a in-depth video about ovulation, so don't be too worried about not knowing what that is quite yet. But to sum it up, ovulation is where an oocyte is going to come out of the ovary, ovulate out of the ovary. And the oocyte is the egg cell, and it is going to be caught by what I like to call a catcher's mitt, and I will get that for you, which is called the infundibulum. The infundibulum catches the eggs that ovulate out of the ovary. And we don't know where they're going to ovulate from, so that's why it covers the whole ovary. It could come out from there, it could come out from there, it could come out from there. So it covers the whole ovary so that it can make sure that that egg is caught. After the egg is caught, it's going to go down a tube called the ampulla, which is right here. And the ampulla is the tube for the egg. It is the tube that egg will travel through to meet the sperm. And if I show you side by side the ampulla and the isthmus, you can kind of see the difference. Oops. So there's our isthmus and there's our ampulla. Isthmus right here and the ampulla. So it's a little bit firmer. The isthmus is a little bit firmer. So where they meet is called the ampullary isthmus junction, and that is the site of fertilization, where the sperm meets the egg and an embryo or a zygote eventually going to become an embryo.
Okay guys, so that wraps up our overview of the reproductive tracts. Thank you, Miranda, for going through those with us, and you'll be able to watch some more videos in more detail.